Live from the Talking Joe studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. What's that got to do with anything? Nothing. It's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. If you're new to the show and wondering what we're all about, you can find out the details at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Today, we will be looking at G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 290, which is a spotlight on the Oktober Guard, which was released on 23rd of March 2022. We will have a special guest appearance from somebody. But before we talk about that, join me, as always, it's a real Soviet Timsky, it's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
How are you, Tim?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Mark?
Very, very good. I'm doing well. So I wondered, Tim, did you see the news that came out very recently before we were recording on the 1st of April from Super 7?
Hey kid,
What?
I'm a computer.
Who wants a body massage?
It's here, the heroes of public service announcements. Get ready for body massage machines and computers with our G.I. Joe PSA merchandise, each sold separately from Super 7.
G.I. Joe.
I saw it at the end of April 1st, and I immediately frowned. and then the reveal happened, and I breathed a sigh of relief.
So we're talking about Super 7's G.I. Joe PSA collection. So they had at this April Fool's Day, they had a product release of Roadblock in big titles, Body Massage, and Mutt, I'm a Computer, along with a skateboard and t-shirt, hat, and I'm a Computer badge, and body butt massage, and enamel pin as well. And my initial reaction was, okay, it's 1st of April. This is just a joke, somewhat elaborate joke, and it's very funny. But then I look on the product page on their website, and it's real. It's real things you can actually buy. Oh, and I guess for context, these are public service parodies that were put out onto YouTube by Fenster Films and went somewhat viral and very popular quite a long time ago. Probably best part of 20 years ago, and yeah, seeing actual release in the form of merchandise and figures.
Well, that's news for me, because I had thought it was real. I frowned, and then I realized it was April 1st, and I thought, okay, good, this is a joke. So now I'm back to frowning.
Yeah.
I am jealous of the... Is it Fensler Films or Fenster Films?
Oh, it's probably Fensler.
I think it's...
If you think it's Fensler, then you'll be right and I'll be wrong. That's fine.
Because they are kind of funny. I don't think the right kind of funny. They are sort of funny and popular. I don't get along with a lot of G.I. Joe parody. In 85, Cracked magazine had a G.I. Joe. I didn't have the issue, but someone showed it to me. I don't know if it was a one-page gag or a several-page, comic, but it was the title of it, or the reference on the cover, was G.I. Joke. And I thought, don't make fun of my thing. And I still actually feel that way about G.I. Joe. I'm a little sensitive, even though in middle school and high school, I drew a hilarious Transformers parody comic book. So some of it is jealousy, because that guy or those guys were very popular. And I would like to think that had I had that idea a little sooner, that popularity could be mine. But also, I think if you're going to make fun of something, it shouldn't be arbitrary. So if Roadblock says body massage, and that's funny because a big guy saying those two words is funny, that doesn't have anything to do with G.I. Joe. That doesn't have anything to do with action or toys or or characters or story. Like you could have Rom Space Knight say body massage, and that has nothing to do with Rom, but I guess the internet finds it funny. So I am interested in a finely tuned, humorous take on brands that I like. So now, if this is what it takes to get those characters out there as action figures, and it's the 40th anniversary. Anything that's good for G.I. Joe is good for G.I. Joe. But I don't think I'll be ordering those for myself.
Mm-hmm. And I've just looked up the blurb, so might as well read this. So yeah, between 1985 and 1987, the G.I. Joe animated series aired on television, featuring public service announcements at the end of each episode, closing with the quote, "Now you know, and knowing is half the battle." In 2003, Eric Fensler began dubbing over the original audio, beginning with a PSA about a child getting separated from his parents at carnival. Overall, 25 PSAs were made featuring nonsensical dialogue such as about pork chop sandwiches, body massages, and computers, among other absurd topics. Originally passed around via VHS tapes, the website became the home and the internet sensation. So there we go. Something that I guess none of us would ever have expected to see in the world of G.I. Joe, but there we are. This is where we are now.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I am surprised, but considering what ultra specific toys are in the G.I. Joe reaction line, for example, the very particular Polar Assault Trooper from the episode The Games Master, that's a very particular character to make a figure out of, and a $17 figure to boot. This isn't like a really obscure Roadblock variant, or I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But up until now, I don't think the Fensler PSAs have ever been officially recognized. People know those punchlines, and certainly people know the original PSAs, and the original PSAs are part of the makeup of Hasbro's YouTube channel, or the new IDW Saturday Morning Adventures miniseries comic book. But I don't think, maybe there's some licensed t-shirt that I haven't noticed in the last 10 or 15 years, but I don't think those terms or this sort of concept has made it into any officially licensed G.I. Joe anything up until now. So that's really surprising, and a testament to Mr. Fensler's longevity.
Now, often at this point in the show, I would introduce our special guest who has had a hand in drawing the comic that we're going to talk about. Now, this particular issue is by Andrew Lee Griffith, and we have caught up with Andrew previously. He won't be joining us today, but instead we have a catch up with the artist who didn't draw the issue, which is new for us. So ahead of the recording, I was able to have a quick catch up with cover artist Heather Vaughan, who was originally slated to draw the interiors as well. So Heather is an award-winning illustrator who lives in Philadelphia. Her work has been featured in a wide range of markets, including editorial, advertising, publishing, concept art, comics, and games art. When she's not drawing, she enjoys spending time with her pets, including her dog, and an ever-growing collection of snakes, lizard, and tarantulas. Her website is hvonillustration.com. So that's hvonillustration.com. So I caught up with her just a little while ago, and here's what she had to say.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages.
Hi Heather, welcome to Talking Joe.
Hi Mark.
Now the first question I'd like to ask is what G.I. Joe means to you personally, and if you had any connection to it before starting on this project.
G.I. Joe was something I kind of grew up with my brother watching. He was much more into it than I was, but I certainly am familiar with it. So I would say it's not something I was like actively interested in, but definitely know of it. Thought it was very cool when the folks at IDW got in touch with me to try me out on a cover. So that was very exciting.
Okay, so that's G.I. Joe covered. What about all of the drawing stuff? So what's your background? How did you get into comics and illustration?
My background in comics and illustration, I kind of went through it the traditional route. Grew up drawing all through, my formative years. My dad was an artist. He was kind of a landscape oil painter. I am not. I'm traditionally trained, went the art school route, did 6 years at University of the Arts, was classically trained, and at the time wanted to work in children's book. Ended up graduating, and my husband ended up needing some help with his board game company, so I started doing board game illustration, and from there is actually how I got into comics in a very roundabout way. With my style, I would get a lot of people that would ask me if I was interested in doing sequential art, and I had never really thought of it as an avenue for myself. I wasn't a big comics person. Certainly admired the art, but had never taken any classes in sequential, so it was never really something I thought of, but enough people had started contacting me about it that I thought I could give it a try, and I want to say early 2020, I had a couple people reach out to me about doing some small anthologies, and I thought that something small format would be a good way to get my feet wet in comics, so they took a shot on me, and turns out they really liked what I was putting out. So I did a horror anthology called Yule, and another kind of longer term series called Hellbent. And I was winging it, kind of learning as I go. So that's kind of how I got my start. And once I had some examples under my belt that I was able to show around, that's kind of how I got into being able to do comics and, got a little bit more work in that area. But it was definitely not something I had any intention of falling into. It was kind of accidental, which is kind of definitely a hallmark of my career, oddly enough.
Cool. I love the different ways that artists find their way into a career in comics. Always a different story. So how would you describe your personal style? I mean, based on what I've seen and looked at on the website and that side of things, I see kind of retro illustrative styles there, a bit of a melting pot of Robert McGuinness, Tula Lotte, Mitch Gerardis, Ming Doyle. What do you think?
As far as how I would describe my style, I think it's very much, it's hard. I would say my personal style is really tied into my traditional training when I was in art school. I did traditional art, I was a painter, I did a lot of pen and ink, and really only moved over to digital the very, very, very tail end of my school career, and tried really hard to kind of match that tactile texture that you get with traditional art making. So I think I don't know, I don't know if I would kind of put my art next to another person's art. I kind of look at it more as pen and ink or printmaking style. I really do like a lot of mid-century illustrators. Austin Briggs is a big person I am inspired by. I do not think that I hold a candle to him. He's one of the greats for a reason, but it's definitely somebody I look towards with the looseness of his lines and his applications of color.
Cool. I'll definitely have to go and check out his stuff. That mid-century influence definitely chimes, though. That was the kind of era I was thinking, and particularly with the Robert McGuinness influence. Now, regarding the G.I. Joe project, how did the opportunity to work on that come about?
The opportunity to work on this particular book, kind of a cold email. They had seen, the folks at IDW had seen some of the work I'd put out and thought I'd be a good fit for the cover, and offered to, try me out on that, with the understanding that when the script was finished, we would move on to doing interior work. So over this past summer, that's when I was contacted to do the cover, which, we were able to bang out pretty quickly. The script wasn't actually finished at the time. So my art direction was very much a little bit vague. So we kept it pretty simple, just like a group shot. And that's kind of something fun I like to do. I do like doing like portraits and character studies in that way.
Okay, so you were asked to do the cover with the understanding that all that goes well, then you could do the interiors, and you did appear on the original solicits for the book. So what were the circumstances that meant that you couldn't actually do the interiors in the end?
That really just came down to just bad scheduling. We weren't exactly sure when the script was going to be finished, and it just didn't work out that when the script did come into being finished, it had been a few months, and unfortunately, timing just didn't work out. There was no hard feelings. It was just bad timing. So, we're hoping in the future we can pick up another project, and I can do some interior work for the folks at IDW, which would be awesome. And, I haven't gotten down to my local comic shop yet, but I am, excited to go and pick up this book and kind of get my feet wet with seeing more of what I could be doing in the future. I don't think G.I. Joe is a subject I expected to work on. It's definitely a little out of my wheelhouse, which is kind of fun for me. So yeah, that's basically it. I had a really good time. It was really exciting to get the job, and yeah.
Yeah, that all makes sense. It's a shame that the scheduling didn't work out for you on this time, but I look forward to seeing your work in the pages of IDW at some point in the future, even if it's not on G.I. Joe. So thanks for taking the time ahead of the live show to record some answers with us.
Hope that is good. Sorry I'm not able to join you, but good luck, and let me know if I can do anything else for you guys. Take care. Thanks. Bye.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
So there we go. Big thanks to Heather for taking the time to record that a little bit earlier on.
I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it. I like Andrew Lee Griffith's work on this issue. What a bummer that we don't have a Heather Vaughan version of this issue, because I like her cover and I am intrigued to see what it may have looked like. Her work is different enough from what we often see in G.I. Joe comics, the main Real American Hero series, that it would have been a really unusual change of pace. And, I wonder how fans who like the more traditional art would have responded to it.
Absolutely, yeah. It would have been very interesting to see how her style would have fit in the book, and it's always interesting to see something a bit new and different. So thanks again to Heather for taking the time. Let's get into the issue, shall we?
Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa. Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa.
So we are talking about issue 290, released 23rd of March 2022. Sit Rep, they are an Eastern Bloc legend. They've gone toe-to-toe with G.I. Joe and Cobra more than once. They've even stood side by side with their American counterparts on occasion. They bring serious heat to the Cold War in more ways than one. They've celebrated victories and they've suffered losses, but somehow they have remained intact. But wait, how? After said losses, have they remained intact? This month, open the top secret dossier, remove those pesky redactions, and find out the long-awaited answers in Spotlight, Oktober Guard. So this issue is brought to us by writer Larry Hama, artist Andrew Lee Griffith, colours Jay Brown, letters Neil Utake, group editor Tom Waltz, and research specialist Diana Davis.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
We have a wealth of covers for this issue. We've got 7 covers again. We've got cover A, B, and a retailer incentive, plus 4 retailer exclusives. So 1 for Spectral Comics and 3 for Eastside Comics. So let's cover A, B, and the retail exclusive first. So cover A, art by Freddie Williams II, colours by Andrew Dalhousie. Roadblock in the last of this combined cover, a bit of an upshot of his nose with Lady J behind him with her trusty shotgun that she's so famous for. Cover B is the Oktober Guard by Heather Vaughan, and cover RI is also the Oktober Guard, art by John Royal, Jagdish Kumar, and colours by James O'Frady. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was ready to say for cover A that I wasn't even going to say anything about it because listeners have now heard my thoughts about Freddie Williams II doing this 5-part. But this one actually turns out to be really exciting. Finally, it's 1/5 of this 5-part cover where the composition on its own is exciting and works by itself. Roadblock comes up really far, blocks a chunk of the logo. The Crimson Guardsman, who's getting punched or falling over backwards, also does the same. And IDW has been seemingly, well, I shouldn't ascribe a motive. I don't want to say hesitant. IDW has infrequently covered the G.I. Joe logo or even part of it. The up angle is a great choice. The only sort of unusual bits are, Flint's 2 fists that come in from the left side. But even that Viper that's getting kicked in the middle left, that's a super exciting recoil reaction pose. So I wish this was a more accurate costume for Roadblock. I wish Roadblock was in the issue, or this was just Freddie Williams II drawing the Oktober Guard. But as an image by itself for a cover, it's very exciting. The thing that jumps out at me immediately about cover B is the unusual color palette. It is an aqua blue on most of the cover. The 6 characters are mostly aqua blue, and then a pale grayish beige for their complexion and some of their clothing. And then there's maybe 1/5 of the cover is red for the background. But that sort of disappears a lot behind the logo, which also covers a giant yellow star. And then what secondarily jumps out at me is how cartoony this is, how somewhat loose but cartoony this is. This is not the realistic proportions of a lot of those 5 or 10 main artists we associate with G.I. Joe, and yet it's not the sort of rounded cartooniness of the Oktober Guard of G.I. Joe Yearbook 2, but it is certainly closer to that than the more standard American adventure style of most G.I. Joe comics. I really like this cover, and Heather Vaughan is very much exaggerating these characters. Tall nose, big nose, little eyes, big eyes close together, some big chunky lines.
Imagine if that was their code names.
Oh, tall nose, skinny nose. And then cover RI by Royal and Jagdish Kumar is gorgeous. The colors are so gorgeous. There's a lot of red, there's a lot of pink, there's a lot of beige. It is a very exciting action pose of the Oktober Guard. One of them is way in the distance, one of them is in the extreme foreground. The other 4 are in the middle ground and not quite full body, but we're far enough away that if they weren't covering each other up, we'd see full body. Colors are gorgeous. I love the reflected light on Colonel Breckoff's teeth and his eye on the right side. There's a little bit of peach, sort of a glowing orange on his teeth and his eye. Just totally, totally gorgeous. Also sort of as an afterthought, I realize, they're standing on ice and snow. This is, where they are, it's cold. And so the flamethrower and all the red is a real contrast to that. My only problem with this cover is Dinah's very feminine pose that is incongruous with the action that she's doing. She's going out of her way to, in her sort of high-heeled boots, sort of stretch her left foot, the foot on the right, forward so that she's sort of planting on the ball of her foot. And I guess is it Dragonski? Who's the flamethrower? Dragonski, thank you. He's doing that too, to a lesser extent behind her, but he's doing it in a masculine way, and she's doing it in an overly feminine way. And I feel like that diminishes the sort of heft of her pose. You know, she's holding two weapons and she's firing and she's got a grim determination on her face, and yet, you know, she's still this sort of J. Scott Campbell skinny babe, you know, with a very, very skinny waist. So I do love this cover, but I wish that foot plant of hers was a little bit more planted. The 4 variant covers, I'll just speak to very generally and then hand it off to you. The first one is crazy. And the second 2 are, I certainly understand how easy it is when you're drawing digitally to create variations. You know, like if you're Steve McNiven and you're drawing Wolverine coming back from the dead, and Marvel says, why don't you do some variant covers where it's the same drawing of Wolverine in the same pose, but versions 1 through 5 or in A through E, he's in different costumes from his history. So because Steve McNiven is, I assume, drawing in the computer, same background, same pose, but the clothing and the hair get redrawn in each one. And that's what's happening here in the second and third of these retailer variants. In addition, a Photoshop left-right flop. So that's great. It's smart. It's easy. I don't love it. You know, I want a whole new drawing. And then sort of for all 4 of these.
I'll interject that we're talking here about a Viper and a Python Patrol version of the Viper, both drawn by Zhong Yang as the Eastside Comics retailer exclusive.
Yes. And then the one that I thought was crazy is Vincenzo Riccardi for Spectral Comics. But all 4 of these, with the 4th one, that's the Baroness, you know, you heard me say it before, I'm not really interested in covers like this where it's a popular character and they're not in the issue and the cover has nothing to do with the issue. Because at this point, this Python Patrol Viper variant cover for a retailer exclusive, IDW might as well print that on an issue of Sonic the Hedgehog or Immortal X-Men #1 or Detective Comics, because the Python Patrol Viper doesn't show up in those either.
Yep. The retailer exclusive of Baroness by Will Jack there, I feel like we've seen enough sort of exclusive covers of variant covers with Baroness as a solo character on the front, and it's a well-established trope that seems to be basically every other issue at the moment. She comes across as looking very, very young in this art, and yeah,
I'm getting a little bit of a Greg Horn vibe from this, from the finish of the digital painting. What do you think about the Vincenzo Riccardi cover for Spectral Comics?
I love it. I'd quite happily have this as like a poster on my wall. It's a bit like Tom Scioli meets Ladron meets Vincent van Gogh. It's crazy and colourful and mad and yeah, great.
Oh, I don't have anything to add. I've already talked enough about the covers.
Cool.
I didn't have anything to add to that. Oh my gosh, it's $40? Wow.
Plot breakdown. Picking up from where Snake Hunt left off, with Dana from the Oktober Guard bleeding out in the back of the Bongo Balloon Bear van. We flash back to Sierra Gordo as Breakov, Horoshoru, Charge and Stormovic are airlifted away to a stealth corvette with high-tech experimental trauma stabilization suites. It's revealed that the Oktober Guards that had died in Sierra Gordo in the events of G.I. Joe Special Missions issue 26 were reanimated and have a majority of cybernetic replacement parts while retaining their organic brains. The Oktober Guard want to get Dana fixed at the same facility, and 1 week later, at the Baikal Robotics and Cybernetics Center in St. Petersburg, Russia, Dana is in a back-to-tank, healing quite nicely. But Horoshow starts glitching and a diagnostic reveals that his AI modules are burned out and the only way to replace them is to steal them from Revanche HQ in New Jersey. The Oktober Guard raid Revanche HQ and find the parts that they need, but they are intercepted by blue ninjas, including a new Quantum Eradicator model that they take out with a mixture of flame followed by cold. Alpha 001 remotely shuts down their AI components, but Horror Show is able to override the controls by sheer force of will and make an escape. But Alpha 001 indicates that with the implants still functioning, they will still have Trojan Horse sleeper agents in play as part of their long game. Dun dun dun.
So my initial reaction to this is that the issue felt short.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I was reading it too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
On second thought, I like how much happens. Actually, a lot does happen. And it's nicely balanced between right after Snake Hunt, the flashback to Special Missions, right after Special Missions 26 from 1989, and the mission that's happening right now in the present day, in the present day of issue 290. It is unusual in that Joes are only in it for 2 pages. And lastly, that because you had made contact with Heather Vaughan initially, and up until relatively recently, the solicits for this issue still listed Heather Vaughan as the artist. I wonder how much time Andrew Lee Griffith had to draw the issue, if it was sort of the new normal of not quite enough time to draw an issue of G.I. Joe, or less than not quite enough time. Mm-hmm. So going into this, I thought, okay, I think I might see some shortcuts. I think I might see some silhouettes, some panels with no backgrounds, 1 or 2 wonky drawings, a little less detail. And if this issue was a rush job, I don't actually see it. I think the storytelling is great. I think the expressions are great. I think it looks... I don't have Andrew Lee Griffith's previous issue next to me for a comparison, but in my mind, it looks consistent with his other work. Mm-hmm. And so from a craft point of view, and also, what he had to draw in this issue, like a lot of issues at G.I. Joe, it's not easy. It's a team. There are some robot ninjas. There's this giant, Giger-esque Borg Queen robot thing. There's there's a real building. There's a real helicopter. So from a craft perspective, I liked it. And my last sort of top-down idea is, I'm not convinced the Oktober Guard needed to come back as cyborgs. I was not looking for that after 1989, and when some of them showed up during Snake Hunt, and then there was that, and Horror Show had that verbal tick, sort of I didn't understand it. And then I think you said, or we figured out, well, either Hama has an idea or he's going to make it up as he goes along. So, and I'm much more interested, rather than creating this new story, sort of how they did survive. It's like, well, they didn't survive, I guess. They did survive. I'm much more interested in the new Oktober Guard, the replacement people that showed up in issue 101 back in, what would that be, 1991, 1992? But if the old Oktober Guard is going to come back, tying them in with Revanche makes sense and sets them up to be a part of issue 300 or the road to 300 in a way that is fun. Mm-hmm. And even though this might all seem to sort of stretch believability, like robots, cyborgs, with the Russian version of G.I. Joe, like, the panel where Horror Show's in the tank and his robot arm is getting attached in a flashback. I remember, yeah. And also his head, the back half of his head. But G.I. Joe had a brainwave scanner, whatever that is, in 1983. And so it actually all works. It actually all fits for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what we don't know or won't know unless Larry actually tells us is to what extent the return of the Oktober Guard was a sort of a lapse in memory, that they were brought back when they were actually dead, and that was a bit of an accident, as happened with the likes of Sneak Peek, or whether there was a sort of story that was either planned or could be made up further down the line. that he had in mind. So yeah, curious to know whether that is. But given that they were killed in a fairly dramatic way initially and came back, I guess it kind of almost forced the need for having a story such as this to kind of explain it, because people obviously did have the question, like, what? They're dead. What gives? So it's kind of either a fix or a planned story that kind of needed to be told to explain away that what would otherwise have been kind of looked at as a kind of a bit of a gap or a continuity error that needed to be explained. You mentioned sort of Andrew Lee Griffith coming on as the replacement artist, and sort of seeing a little bit of the behind the scenes, because I'd been talking to Heather Vaughan about joining us on the show, and then subsequently with Andrew, it seems like he probably only had 2 to 3 weeks to work on this at most. So because I heard from Heather in very early February that before she had started work on the book, and then when I spoke to Andrew later on towards the back end of February, he had already completed it a couple of weeks prior. So it's most likely only a couple or maybe 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I guess that Andrew had on it, depending on when they had the script ready and across to him. So yeah, we know that most comic artists, 1 page a day is typically a push. So I think he must have been working full pelt to get it going. And yeah, it does in places. I think it does feel like maybe you can see that, but I couldn't really put my finger on that definitively to say what about it does make me think that maybe there was a rush there. It's a hard thing to put one's finger on, but there isn't an obvious tell, because it still all hangs together.
The obvious tells that I don't see here, that I have seen in comics in the past, all sorts of comics, Marvel, DC, Image, everyone. The first few pages are sort of the normal level of polish and finish you'd expect. And then pages at the end, there are fewer details. If someone's known for their lots of tiny little lines, like Jim Lee, lots of little lines, cross-hatching, like hair on Wolverine's arm, that stuff drops out. Fewer backgrounds, a couple panels where someone is all of a sudden in silhouette, or the more sort of egregious example. And there are lots of issues of I think X-Men Unlimited like this in the mid 90s, where one person pencils it and then 8 or 10 people ink it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think back to that issue of X-Men Unlimited when I was first exposed to this. I think it's issue, 7 or 8. I think Havoc is in it. Is it the one with Sauron on the cover? I can't remember. But, at the time, that's really disappointing. Now, when I find this in a back issue bin, it's really interesting and funny to me. Like, oh, here's some issue of Conan, which... the inker is credited as M Hands, like many hands, or,
right.
The inker is Krusty Bunkers, which is between 3 and 11 people sitting around Neil Adams, banging this thing out in 2 days. And, I don't know if I can, in some 1970s issue of Conan, figure out who inked what. And it starts to get really hard where someone's inking all the faces and someone else is inking all the bodies, and then 6 other people are inking the backgrounds. But I also, if someone stays up all night or skips meals or, doesn't go to their kid's soccer game, or, you just take a week off their life 30 years from now so that they can double time on a crazy deadline now, none of that stuff is good. But it is possible that, and I wouldn't assign this to issue 290, but it is possible that an artist who normally has 3 or 4 or 5 weeks on an issue may not spend the first few days of that as efficiently as they could. And having a kind of terrible deadline forces them to drop away a lot of worry and to just draw, to just sort of desperately draw. And whether they realize it or not, lean on their instinct. And a good comics artist with good storytelling, if you give them less time, may turn in not a better job, but if you give them half the time, I don't think they're going to turn in half the job. I think it might, whatever the math is, turn in 86% of the job. And that's really impressive in its own way. That when you, in my comics class with my college sophomores and juniors, many times I would give them a 1 or 1.5 hour assignment in class. This isn't homework. I give everyone 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of photocopy paper and a writing prompt that's just an idea or a statement. And it's like, okay, you have 90 minutes. Write and draw a 1 or 2 page comic based on this concept. Autobiographical, right now, go. And everyone just sort of jumps into it and doesn't worry. No one stops to think. And, a student raised their hand and they said, can I pull out my phone and Google the Eiffel Tower? Because I want to draw it correctly. And I have this rule in my classroom for that class. No phones. And I said, no phones. In fact, I'm actually much more interested in how you badly draw the Eiffel Tower from memory than how you draw it really well when you've got a picture of it, particularly if you might be searching for the right photo of it, and that takes you 3 precious minutes. So maybe we can ask Andrew Lee Griffith one day, in a general sense, how was it drawing issue 290?
Mm-hmm. I was just flicking through, trying to see if there are any backgrounds or pages where it's it's a bit more obvious that maybe there's been shortcuts that have been taken, and I can't spot them, to be honest. Most of these pages are pretty busy with detail, so there isn't obvious things jumping out saying, yeah, this is where a bunch of time has been saved. So,
and the other place where you might see a mistake is, particularly in a book like this, where we've had scenes where we're in a warehouse, someone's in a car or a Jeep, it crashes into the warehouse. There are 3 to 6 bad guys in the warehouse, 2 to 4 people in the Jeep who get out, and there's a gunfight, and someone moves sort of from left to right, and you sort of have to keep track of who's on the left side of the room, who's on the right side of the room, who's ducked behind this crate, and keeping the character placement, to use a movie term, screen direction, who's on the left, who's on the right, who's looking left, who's looking right, and movement and choreography clear and consistent. And similarly, I was not confused. I mean, for example, and this is a really basic one, once the Blue Ninjas engage with the Oktober Guard, every single page of this fight, the Oktober Guard are on the left looking right. Mm-hmm. And in most of them, the Blue Ninjas are on the right looking left. And then the exception is at the end, the second to last page of the comic, where 3 of the Oktober Guards turn around. But, it's all clear. I'm never sort of confused, like, which hallway are they in? And, this may be a case where Griffith turned in some art and Hama wrote dialogue a little differently than he might have to slightly patch. But usually that stuff sticks out to me, and I don't see it here. And as an example of storytelling that's really good, and this is separate from, did the artist have enough time or not, on page 8, 9, 10. 2 weeks later, it's nighttime, and the Oktober Guard have pulled up in this truck, mm-hmm. and they're going to break into the Revenge headquarters in New Jersey. And panel 3, Dana says, "Niet, Colonel Brekoff, everything's locked up tight on the roof with steel bars on skylights, infrared detectors, armored doors, and floodlights." And you see all that stuff in that panel. You see 2 little boxes that are sort of glowing red, and you see bars on windows, and okay, I don't see floodlights. I see 3 out of the 4 things. And in the previous panel, Brekoff says, "Dana, has your drone found anything useful?" And she's holding a remote control. And so there is lots of good continuity, and I'm certain in Hama's plot, he wrote, page 10, like nighttime exterior, the Revenge building in New Jersey, see issue so-and-so for reference. And then spells all this out that, they're all looking at screens. She's got the radio control. We need to see the drone, if not leaving the van, then having already left the van and hovering in front of the building or over the building or approaching the building. And these are the things we need to see. And maybe Hama provided reference. This is the kind of bar that goes over the window. Or, maybe he just called it out and Griffith found it on the internet.
So the other thing that struck me about this issue was how it's sort of situated in terms of the chronology or the time. So Dana was shot in issue 274, and then in the Snake Hunt finale, the Oktober Guard piled into the back of the Bongo Balloon van and sort of are driving off, and sort of I checked back to that, and it's all all tying in with with who was driving in that van at the time. Stalker and Rock and Roll and Wade Collins and co. So it's all linked, but it's interesting that we're kind of picking up from issue 275, 15 issues on. So kind of an interesting use of time in terms of being picking up a thread quite so much later.
Yeah, I think some of this is the challenge or opportunity of writing this particular comic with a huge cast. And some of this is the challenge or opportunity of writing a book that's in the issue 270s or 290s, because you can go anywhere, and there are some comparisons in comics. I read a lot of X-Men, and there are a lot of issues, if Uncanny X-Men isn't running at the moment, although there's some analog books for a title called Uncanny X-Men. But, it'd be up to issue 700 right now if it had been published continuously. And, there are lots of one-panel flashbacks, and there are lots of, random issues where someone has a big speech to someone else about something that happened in the 70s or in the 90s. And, there's a one-page summary, and sometimes an entire miniseries gets published just to explain something that happened 100 issues ago, or someone has an idea and they want to expand on it. And then also, what happened right issue 275, either it was Hama's idea or it was Editorial's idea that there would be some self-contained issues. And now here we are building up to issue 300, and either Hama wants to or has written himself into a corner with addressing the Oktober Guard's return. And, part of the Oktober Guard showing up for Snake Hunt, I think, was that the idea in Snake Hunt is that every character showed up. Mm-hmm. And so one of my sort of internal comparisons for G.I. Joe in the 260s, 270s, 280s is a band, a musical band, not anyone in particular, but like your favorite band that is from the 70s or 80s or 90s, and that is on their 10th or 15th or 25th studio album, or even from the 60s, right? Because the Rolling Stones are still around. And, if you're only going to publish, one of those like 12-issue Batman miniseries by a particular writer-artist team, you've got a very particular tone and style and mission and era and set of characters. If the last 300 issues of Batman or Detective Comics had been written by one person, not a new person every year or three, there'd be a lot of weird and exciting left turns where the writer or editorial would say, why don't we do a bunch of flashbacks? Or why don't we do a bunch of self-contained issues? Or someone would write in and say, that thing never got explained. And so, you have your favorite band or musician, and, for their 13th album, they make a concept album, or they, team up with a bunch of collaborators, and it's a very different kind of band. And Hama has said in an unpublished interview that with all the crazy toys that were happening in the late 80s and 90s, and more and more characters, there can be a sense of desperation that sets in. And I don't know if he's referring to sort of Hasbro coming up with crazier and crazier stuff, or sort of he's left to figure it out. Like, okay, well, now I got to use, Eco Warriors. But, one of the choices he can make is like, yep, I'm going to have a flashback to 10 or 15 issues ago. And also within this issue, a flashback to, 100 plus issues ago. I don't know. What is the comparison? Batman, Detective Comics, Uncanny X-Men. X-Men books for many years had a lot of flashbacks. And then under one or two sort of publishing or editorial regimes, the rule was no flashbacks, or the sort of urge was, let's not do a lot of flashbacks. It's confusing, or it's makes readers feel like they're not, if they're new readers, they don't understand. But
yeah, it's kind of it's less a flashback and more picking up a thread and then
yes,
sort of taking it forward, and sort of jumping ahead a couple of weeks at a time as well. But the larger and longer flashback is obviously back to G.I. Joe Special Missions issue 26, where the Oktober Guard died originally, and I did go back and have a look at the issue to remind myself of quite what their state was when they died. And so Stormovic and Charge dying by barrages of gunfire, and one of them falling over on a lever, sort of in a very heroic way. But Breakov and Horrorshow, sort of their deaths were slightly more grisly and explosive, literally, in terms of Horrorshow had been shot dead and slumped over on Breakov, and Breakov then chucks a grenade into the back of the vehicle that they're in, which is filled with explosives, as it then collides with a Cobra vehicle, and it explodes, sort of clearing the track, I think it was. So they both died in quite a large way, and as we skip forward into that the flashback, while Horrorshow is looking in quite a bad way, Breakoff is there at least sort of awake, alert, and sort of attending to his friend and sort of bandaging him up. So I wasn't entirely sure of how that all tied together in terms of how we last saw him exploding in his vehicle.
Which brings up a question for me, because I think you're referring to page 1, 2, 3, 4, where we see Breakoff over Horrorshow, and then the pilot is talking to Breakoff. So the next two panels on page 4, the nurse has put this crazy helmet on Horrorshow, and then both the third and fourth panels, there's all this dramatic red, yellow and orange light, and there's this device on the right side that the nurse is looking at, and she says, "We have the latest experimental trauma stabilization suites. We can do amazing things these days." And then the pilot says is it Trage?
Oh, I get confused. One of the two.
Yeah, sorry. It's such a G.I. Joe fan. I can't tell these guys apart. He's going to cardiac arrest. Get him into the auto defib and tube him up. So is the yellow and orange light coming from that device in panel 3? Is that actually in the helicopter? Or are we getting sort of a visual, not flashback, but flash forward to where they're gonna go? I actually was confused by these two panels.
Yeah, I agree. It was the thing that sort of threw me the most, because it was weird, but it seems like they're still in this helicopter, because it sort of immediately follows them sort of landing on the helipad of the boat. So
well, I didn't mean like, are these two panels now actually a flash forward? What I meant is the background. Does the background belong to what the nurse is imagining, almost as if it should be in a giant thought balloon? The background should be a giant thought balloon where she's like, "No, let me tell you about where we can take you." Blue, 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 blue. And then this sort of Jack Kirby device with a little bit of Kirby crackle actually is making all these. But the yellow and orange light is hitting these other four characters, these other three characters in the scene, and so it's drawn as if it is an object in the helicopter.
Yeah, agree.
So I don't know if Hama had an idea and Griffith didn't quite pick it up, or if Hama and Griffith had an idea, and did colorist Jay Brown color this object as if it's in the room, but if it had just been like flat yellow or flat blue and not illuminating the characters, then we would like read it as something we can imagine, later on. Like the way that when you watch any newscaster in the studio, they're sitting in front of a giant monitor, a TV or a green screen, and if they're talking about Washington D.C., like the Capitol and the Washington Monument are behind them, but they're sitting in a studio elsewhere in D.C. or in New York. They're not actually in front of the White House, and we understand that now they're talking about the White House or the things happening in Washington D.C. So, but she's looking at it. The nurse is looking at it, and also Horror Show is looking at her or looking at it, and
I think
already now.
Yeah, I think his bizarre helmet is connected to the glowing device because there's that sort of tube leading out from his his mouthpiece, like a giant
elephant trunk. Yeah, it goes off to the bottom of the panel, but then you sort of see something like it come in from the right side of the panel.
Yeah.
I think, I think this could be fixed with one word balloon or one small color change. So if it's a mistake rather than something that actually works and I'm just misunderstanding it, I think it's a weird mistake, but relatively easily fixable. I don't know that IDW would. I've always got this hope, like, oh, can you fix it for the inevitable paperback collection and the digital versions? But I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what the original description is for that panel, just to see what the original intent was as to quite how well it is actually captured in the final book. Maybe it looks exactly like it was intended, but it's just a bit confusing and strange. You know what?
Actually, I now I sort of wonder: is there a missing word balloon? Because if you took the nurse's word balloon, we have the latest experimental. If you moved that up and to the left, if you put that sort of over Horror Show's head, and you had a different word balloon where she's like, "I've hooked him up to the Kirby machine," because she says we have the latest stabilization. But if it was something like, "We have the latest stabilization, let me prime him with our portable unit."
Yeah.
And then again, in terms of I'm not quite sure if this thing is real in the helicopter or not. On the next page, when they're taken off in stretchers, it's not like we don't, in that, on the ship, in the ocean, in the rain, as the helicopter unloads the injured people on stretchers, we don't then also see the nurse carrying Horror Show out, and he's still wearing that helmet, and he's like tugging along the Kirby machine next to him,
like an IV drip on wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would help. That would help for sure. I'm just looking back at my notes. My note was, what the heck is going on in that helicopter?
This might be a place where, I've often referred to feeling like IDW G.I. Joe stories, they sort of accelerate right at the end around page 17, 18, because they're only 20 pages. They're not 22 pages. And it's not like a medal I will pin on each issue. It's like, this is where I feel like the issue got a little shortchanged. But if there was one more page, this scene might have a little more breathing room. I don't think it needs the space. I think it needs a slightly different approach to art or lettering or scripting or color. But it's not so confusing. It didn't lose me. It didn't, anger me. I just thought, okay, I think I understand this. And then I kept reading.
Okay, let's push. Shall we push on into the raid in Revanche? Should we skip ahead to that bit?
Yeah.
So I think that's done. That's not badly handled, and I like you said, when kind of it reads as a very fast comic. It feels like it happens all very quickly, and you get to the end of the comic very quickly. And it was only really when I came to write the plot breakdown that I realized quite how much actually happens in the single issue. But I did feel a little bit like a raid on Revanche again. We've had lots of raids on Revanche over the last 150-ish issues. It feels like we've just it's a plot that's happened an awful lot.
My take on it was that these blue ninjas are not scary or experts.
Mm-hmm.
In previous issues, the Joes talked about, aiming for the head. It's not that these aren't Cobra bats in blue fatigues. They're ninjas.
Mm-hmm.
And when we've seen ninja, like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and Zartan.
Yeah, Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, fighting against one blue ninja to a standstill in some of the earliest appearances.
And we've seen a couple ninja in all of G.I. Joe that are easily dispatched, and I guess not very good ninja, like the 3 red ninjas in issue 21 that get taken out with a grenade. And it's like a joke. It's the Indiana Jones joke with the pistol in the marketplace. And if there's something about all right, so you've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Oktober Guard, and they're fighting what seems like 10 or 15 or 20, not just Cobra bats, not just ninjas. They're basically Cobra bat ninjas.
Mm-hmm.
It's some third party, but like, the Oktober Guard are armed for bear. They've got machine guns and a flamethrower and some rocket launchers. And the ninjas have basically lightsabers.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like what I was expecting was a longer fight, a more difficult fight that, sort of taking the hallway and then taking the stairs. I expected the blue ninjas to sort of, there's that panel where one of the blue ninjas is jumping when the Oktober Guard are saying, they're mounting an android wave attack. And then Stormvivek says, I got this. And one of the blue ninjas is jumping above the other. And I thought, okay, now these ninja are going to sort of get past the oncoming rifle fire. And with their swords, like, attack and chop up some of these Oktober Guardsmen. And I thought, oh, maybe they're not going to make it out of the story because the odds are actually not in their favor this time. And the Oktober Guard dispatched them, I don't want to say easily, but directly. Mm-hmm. And that's actually pretty satisfying, but I don't know if it fit the logic of how scared I feel like I'm supposed to be of the blue ninjas. I'm glad the Oktober Guard got what they wanted, and in terms of the nuts and bolts of this story, thank you. If the Oktober Guard get the parts, if they grab a couple boxes of inventory so that they can go back and fix themselves, but really that's what the blue ninjas wanted after all, because then it can activate sleeper agents through their cybernetic parts, then good. So like, oh, did they let them? Was it too easy? But yeah, as you just said, if it's taken several Joes to fight one blue ninja to a standstill, I feel like every time we've seen the blue ninjas, they've sort of gotten less effective at fighting. Yeah. And maybe actually that's what it is. Maybe they're less effective. Maybe the drones are not as deadly as, Alpha 001
mm-hmm.
has gotten bigger and smarter and stronger. So this feels a little bit like how sometimes Cobra and Cobra Commander are a little silly or a little less serious and a little less deadly. And then, Cobra Commander throws 2 people in the trunk of a car, it pulls out his pistol and fires into it. What was that issue? 170 or 210 or something? And I remember thinking, oh my God, Cobra Commander just killed these guys. Like, yes, Tim, Cobra Commander heads a worldwide terrorist organization. He's a disgruntled domestic terrorist who's gone international. So I feel like sort of similarly, sometimes the blue ninjas are less deadly and less exciting. And then all of a sudden, one of them will like injure a Joe and I'll think, oh man, these blue ninjas sure are tough. And I expected that to happen
mm-hmm.
here.
There was a comment that when I was looking over on His Tank forum to see what people were saying over there. There was a comment from VXC961 who said, I just don't feel like Horror Show's humanity was really earned or explained in the story. And that sort of chimed with me. There's this element where they sort of outline the percentage of robotic parts that each of the Oktober Guard have, and they say that Horror Show is at 100%, which threw me a little bit as well, because 100% would imply that there's no human left at all, which I think we've established.
We see skin.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't think it's 100, but and if it is 100, then how, just saying sheer force of will alone gets over them shutting down his roboty bits when his teammates at what is it, 20%, 70%, 60% get shut down completely. I'm not too sure that completely makes sense. Yeah, where are we? It's Breakoff is at 20%, Stormovic is at 40%, and Shrage is over 70%. And Stormovic and Shrage both get shut down completely, and Breakoff keeps going with just his arm shutting down because he's only at 20%. So he's able to keep on going. Whereas Horror Show at 100% is able to pick up his teammates and fight on through. Yeah.
I will agree. I'm thinking again about this overall idea to bring these characters back from the dead and to make another sort of larger comic book comparison with, say, Batman or X-Men. Bruce Wayne died. There's a story. Grant Morrison wrote this big story where Batman dies. Sort of. He gets shot by a time bullet.
Yeah, it gets complicated.
Goes to prehistory, and it's particularly complicated because it happens during, not just in the Batman comic, it happens during a larger DC miniseries event. So I don't know, it's hard to read the whole story in the right order. And Superman has died, and the Punisher has died, and twice, I think. Cyclops has died twice, and Wolverine has died, and these characters come back, and we expect that, and this is even separate from the X-Men characters all now being able to resurrect. But we expect this from superhero comics because it's been a decades-long tradition or convention. In the world of G.I. Joe, the comparison would be Dr. Mindbender, Serpentor, Cobra Commander, and Serpentor's death originally is amazing, and when he came back, I remember thinking, well, this isn't necessary. And Cobra Commander's death originally was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And with a little bit of grown-up information and logic, at the time, I thought, oh, this guy's never coming back. This seems so permanent. But I understand that, Hasbro was going to change his mind, or Hasbro was going to make a new toy. It's like, this character had to come back sooner or later. Either because Hama said, I just have to do it, or because Hasbro said, well, we're going to make another toy. And Hama said, yeah, I told you. and similarly with Mindbender, Hama thought he was done with Mindbender. And then all of a sudden there was, a couple years later, a new Mindbender toy. And so, well, he's a clone. And with the Oktober Guard, their original deaths are so meaningful. And it's sort of interesting and painful that there are now replacements in issue 101 in the 100 and in the 100 and zeros. And if Hama was always going to have to, or always going to choose to, bring Cobra Commander back, and when Serpentor came back, I don't feel like that story did a lot for me, and then his death also didn't do a lot for me. So that felt like a lesser version of what I'd already seen. Mm-hmm. And if the Oktober Guard have to be back, I like this issue and I'm glad they're back. But I think this issue, or a version of this story, would have more pathos if the replacement Oktober Guard were doing a version of this mission, if the replacement Oktober Guard had shown up for Snake Hunt. Mm-hmm. When, every living Joe is going to show up. And if you want, as the replacement Oktober Guard after 274, 275, gets away and they're having a hard time, them to also flash back to the last time the Oktober Guard had a hard time in Special Missions 26, then I think there are sort of forced resurrections, and there are resurrections by choice, and I don't know that the resurrections by choice always get you sort of the greatest benefit. At the same time, I also feel like, as much as we all know and believe, and Hama has talked about the 300 issue story, special missions and all the Marvel run and all the IDW run as one story. I also sometimes do think of the Marvel run as its own thing, and the IDW run as sort of this converging, diverging thing. Sometimes it really is issue 156 and up, and it's the rest of the story. And sometimes it's its own 150 issue story. And here it's sort of like, this is sort of like the first time I've seen this Oktober Guard, and I guess they're cyborgs, as opposed to like, well, we got to know them in the 80s, and then they died, and then they were replacements, and then they came back.
Yeah, and there's sort of talking about maybe missed opportunities or moments of pathos that we could have had, and I think there's probably a scene that maybe we're missing here that would have been interesting as well, which is the living Oktober Guards, being Dana and Dragonsky, the moment that they find out that their fallen comrades are not quite so fallen as well. So when did that happen? What would that have looked like? Because presumably they're sort of continuing on in the dark. Yeah, not knowing this, that they've come back. They did join the new Oktober Guard with their Gorky and Mishka, and sort of, I guess, assuming that their the former comrades were no longer in the land of the living.
Yeah. But, that could be I don't think we're getting any extra one-shot issues between now, now and three.
Probably never see that, but yeah.
Between now and 300, but that is a comic that could be written and drawn, and I would buy.
Yeah.
And I would talk to you about it for 2 hours.
Because during Snake Hunt as well, there was that sort of moment where I think it's Horror Show starts glitching, and they sort of try and deal with it while sort of Dana and Dragonsky are sort of in the other room or something. So it's like the sort of slight insinuation back then was that maybe they didn't know, or perhaps maybe they just did, wanted to hide some of the realities of what it's like being a cyborg from people, somewhat maybe of a shameful moment rather than necessarily a secret. So I guess an elephant in the room, sort of regarding this issue as well, is the timing of it coming out. An Oktober Guard spotlight in the middle of real world situations where Russia is also very much in the spotlight. Who would have guessed back in the summer when we first heard about this issue that Russian soldiers might be in the news?
Yeah. A year ago, or half a year ago, Hama posted on social media that he was rewriting a scene or changing an issue because, and we sort of pinpointed this to, was it part 2 of Murder by Assassination?
Yeah, that's right,
or
yeah.
Part where the Joes are at the Senate, or they're at the Capitol, talking to a committee or a subcommittee, and because of the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, Hama either chose to or was nudged to change his story. I'm guessing Hama just chose to.
Mm-hmm.
And G.I. Joe has always reflected the real world, and then also gone its own path and ignored the real world and not worried about the real world. We have the Iron Curtain in G.I. Joe, but it's Barovia. It's not Germany.
Yeah.
And we have a larger Middle Eastern country invading a smaller Middle Eastern country in the early 90s. And that happens in G.I. Joe, but it's 2 fictional countries, and also Cobra is involved. But, something like the terrorist attacks of September 11th or the meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan, I don't think those things have happened in this G.I. Joe storyline between issues. Or they have the way that, I don't know, landing on the moon and Pearl Harbor happened. They're very far away.
Yeah, this issue, I guess the script would have been turned in early February. So had it been written just 1 month later. I think who knows, all of the modern all of the contemporary situation percolating, we might have ended up with a slightly different story, but who knows. What about Alpha 001 and his long game? You got any speculation on where that's heading?
I don't. And I feel okay saying that because I also don't think Larry Hama does either. And I don't say that to try and sell him down the river. I think he tells us often that that's how he writes. Maybe Hama sort of this time has a notion of where he's going for 300, but it might be just as general or vague as there'll be a big fight for issue 300. The way that 50 and 275 were big fights, or maybe it's like, well, the first half of 300 should be a big fight, and then the back half should be some 6 pages of wrap up, a la a letter from Snake Eyes, or the final page of Special Missions 29.
Yeah.
So I have no guesses.
And I guess introducing things like the Trojan Horse sleeper agents in the Oktober Guard maybe is something he'll do something with. Maybe it won't, but it's like by introducing it now, it gives him something to play with should he choose to. And I've heard him sort of describe that as a kind of way of writing that. Let's put this in, it gives us room to something to follow up on. I don't know what it means yet, but I can come back to it.
Yeah, and I also think as much as fans who are sort of maybe frustrated by, or fans who are also writers who would never themselves take this Hama approach of making it up as they go along. I think with such a big cast and with such a long history, I feel like a lot of us, if we were suddenly to be writing a Real American Hero, would do more of that than we realize. I think sort of out of necessity, you might. I think you could do a lot of plotting, but 5 issues, 10 issues, however far ahead you had plotted, you would get some new ideas, or in the real world, a country would invade another country and you would shift gears, or, some figure would come out in the classified line and a fan would give it to you at a convention and you'd think, oh, I wasn't going to do anything with the alley viper, but this orange is just bonkers. I think I'll rewrite half that issue that I was thinking about writing coming up, and it'll be about this alley viper, right? Mm-hmm. In a very general sense, I don't think anyone's going to die leading up to issue 300.
Huh.
I think that Hama has said he doesn't like killing characters, even though he has done it before. And whether or not a new G.I. Joe comic that we hope starts from another publisher after December of 2022, whether or not it continues this G.I. Joe continuity explicitly or implicitly, and Hama just posted this week on social media about how a character like Snake Eyes can be and needs to be, and maybe it wasn't even Snake Eyes, maybe it was all the characters, morally upstanding, like that this is like uplifting fiction for readers. And even though issue 155 has some pessimism in it, I think this is going to end on a hopeful note, or a more realistic note that balances optimism and pessimism. So yes, is it possible that like every character that we have seen die previously and has come back will die by issue 300, and sort of like the decks get properly reset? Yeah, I don't think Cobra Commander's going to die. I don't think Mindbender's going to die. I don't think Snake Eyes, Throwdown or Dawn Marino are going to die. I think there'll be something, Cobra Island, the Pit, Revanche. I think one of those 3 or all those 3 locations. I don't think the final 3 issues are going to take place in some location we haven't been. But Hama might be writing that story that I'm describing right now in October. So who knows?
Oh dear. And as I sort of flicked past the end of the issue, we've got next month reveal. Next month we have got a front cover with, I think this is the cover B, art by S.L. Gallant of Cobra Commander and Mindbender in a casino mobile, while in the background people are queuing up to be brainwashed in a casino, what is, I guess, touted as a casino game, Plan TX virtual hold'em on the brainwave scanner.
TX for Texas.
Yep. And what struck me most about this was that it's an actual cover reveal in the pages of the comic. I'm so used to seeing the cover of the next issue months ahead on the interwebs, that to actually see the next cover and see it for the first time in the pages of the comic is most unusual, but very cool.
I was very excited when I turned the page and got to read the final page of this issue, and also, as you say, see this really fun and really well drawn and really well composed, and not just a drawing, but an illustration, a drawing that tells a story. Cover B by Gallant for issue 291. Which I'll talk about in a future episode, so I don't want to get into this too much.
But we also know that now the name of the next storyline, which is going to be called High Stakes.
So, but then I turned the page one more time, and I didn't see a letters page, and I saw this wonderful ad for Saturday Morning Adventures #1 again, and. I know putting together a comic can be, sort of last minute, getting files ready for the printer, and, the letters page is the last thing to get done. This issue should have arrived a little earlier, but it's like, no, issue 2 of Saturday Morning Adventures came out last week. This ad should be for issue 2. I really want a letters page. Because I want to know what one or two people think, and I want that interaction. I want to know that there are some fans who are talking to IDW and Hama, and that Waltz and Hama are talking back, even if if that's happening on, I don't know, His Tank or some IDW discussion. Probably not, but I missed that letters page.
Yeah.
And I wrote a letter to
No.
not about this series. I wrote a letter about Saturday Morning Adventures #1, and I guessed correctly that issue 2 of that series would not have a letters page, because side miniseries like Sierra Muerte and Silent Option and the yearbooks do not have letters pages.
Yeah.
But I was hoping, since I had written a letter on Saturday Morning Adventures 1, that I would get it printed in issue 2. But if anyone's curious, I took that letter and added a few paragraphs, and that is a blog post that I posted on my blog.
There was a particularly excellent comment on the His Tank forum about the missing letter page, again from the same chap, VCX961. He said, "Also, I'm bummed there was no letter page. Even when the letters are bad, I just enjoy seeing them and the editorial comments. Also, every once in a while, someone like Funky Bunch Marks writes in, and the letters page is really interesting." So we've got some really deep thinkers over there on that particular forum saying some very factually correct things.
It is possible no one sent in letters. I think it's more likely that the normal, very small number of letters arrived, and the issue was running late, or the editors are pulled in a million directions, and it was much easier to run an ad instead of that letters page. But I liked this issue, even though it represents a choice that I wouldn't make. I think this is a good comic and a good G.I. Joe comic, even if it comes from a thesis that is not one from where I would start. But I do have an I Spy. It sounds like I'm about to do Yo Joe score, but
I spy with my little eye.
I Spy. I think I spied the first appearance of a named Blue Ninja, which is Quantum Eradicator.
Uh-huh.
On page, I guess it's, It's about 3/4 of the way through. He's running at us, and his arms are down, and he's sort of at an angle.
Yep.
And I thought, as soon as I saw that, oh, I don't think any of them have been named before. And then I thought, is there a Joe toy called Eradicator? Is this not actually a reference to an existing character or vehicle, but one of those sort of funny overlaps? You know how like there's two guys named Airborne? Or like if all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a vehicle driver for the Joes named Rage. Wait, that's also a Cobra vehicle. So is there a...
It doesn't look like it.
There's no Eradicator. There's no Joe... Yeah, there's no Joe named Eradicator. What am I thinking of? I'm thinking of
There's Eradicator from Superman.
I'm thinking of Interrogator and Eliminator and Overkill. I'm thinking of a guy who's like this, Overkill, and then words that sort of rhythmically rhyme with it.
Yeah. I suspect that there's been other named Blue Ninjas before. Like maybe
I thought they were just numbered.
Or maybe numbered potentially. I was thinking of the Blue Ninja in the yearbook, the one that hunts.
Oh, that's 3 feet away. I could grab that and look while you talk. 1 second. You talk.
No. I'll have to do more editing if I talk.
Flipping through it. BNZ001. That's the big spider one. BNX0066.
Oh, maybe that's him. Could be. Is he the one that gets sent on the mission?
That's the one that gets the face. That gets the skin put on its.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe you're right. Maybe they've all been numbered prior to this point. Could be. There's been a lot of Blue Ninjas.
Do not struggle. Damage will occur. I am Blue Death X86. I am optimized for ninja elimination. Thank you. That's my Blue Ninja impression. Yeah, I don't think there's a name.
Okay, maybe not.
Okay.
My I Spy was the Stealth Corvette. So this is that Oktober Guard sort of battleship looking thing that the helicopter lands on. So this is based on the Project 2038-6 multi-purpose corvette, which is a real world ship due to be commissioned 2023. So wouldn't have been around back in the days of Special Missions issue 26, but is based on a real world thing. The other I Spy I had, which I wonder if you've got somewhere in your notes or maybe slotted away in your brain box, Tim, is on the very first panel of the book. There's a panel that says, "In the aftermath of the last Battle of Springfield, Asterix," and in the Asterix call-out box it says, "See G.I. Joe ARAH Vol 24, Snake Hunt, Sergeant Waltz." Now, this is printed in the monthly book. I would very much like to see the numbered monthly issue being credited. Thank you.
Okay, so I think what is happening is you as a reader are reading the issues, and so you want this issue footnote to send you back to an issue because you have issues. You don't have books.
I got all kinds of issues.
I think the publisher is making the decision to create the footnote in the format that looks to the long term, because in the future, someone reading this story will be reading it digitally, or the Volume 24 Snake Hunt collection, the $29.99 paperback, and they'll be reading the series as paperbacks. And so when they're holding whatever this is, Volume 26, 27, they will know where to go on their shelf as opposed to their back issues. And I have noticed this in the monthly Usagi Yojimbo. which coincidentally IDW is publishing right now. But I think this may have switched over a couple years ago when Dark Horse was still publishing Usagi Yojimbo. There are occasional footnotes which point back to previous stories. And in the last year or two or three, I have noticed a couple of footnotes which refer to the story by the story title and the actual paperback collection, not the issue. Not like See Usagi Volume 2, Issue 10, but it's like See Usagi Volume 9, Grasscutter. But I'm getting those wrong, but so this may be an IDW thing. This may be just sort of everyone knows that the graphic novel collections are the sort of the more permanent format. It may be cost saving because maybe IDW wants to do a version for you. This issue points back to an issue, and then they do a second file for this page, which points back to the graphic novel for the digital versions and the graphic novel collection. But they don't want to have to go back in and do
exactly. They want to future-proof it so that they don't have to go back and redo it, or pick it, or or remember to pick up a different version of that same box when they come to do the trade paperback. So I understand why they did it, but as a monthly reader, it would be nice to have the individual issue. So
I had an I Spy, and that is on the third to last page, when Quantum Eradicator, when this blue ninja that seems sort of more particular than a lot of the other ones, less a drone and more of a commander, when it is glowing hot and then gets splashed with this ice cold nutrient fluid, and it sort of freezes up, and you see these sound effects, crack, snap, pop, and then key rack. It looks like what I want to describe as sort of how in comics after 1991, after the existence of the film Terminator 2 Judgment Day, I feel like if you describe a robot to 20 people and you have them draw it, I think a lot of people are going to use the T1000, or I guess it's the T800 endoskeleton as a reference point, whether they sort of think about it or not. So I looked at this panel where Key Rack, the third panel, the rusted, I guess it's not rusted, the frozen, snapping, breaking metal body, and I thought, this sort of looks like something I've seen in G.I. Joe before, and it reminded me, I think, of the bats that are in the Star Brigade arc around issue 145, 146, 147, 148, and it reminds me a little bit of the bat that is on the covered issue 153, which is to say, in a world after Terminator 2 Judgment Day, I think a lot of people are going to, if they draw one sort of, metal robot cyborg without the skin or without its clothes, it's going to look more like the Terminator than less. That's a very complicated I Spy. But I have another one.
and the sequence of him getting hot and then cool and then cracking is also a very Terminator 2 style sequence where the T1000 is covered in liquid nitrogen or some such, and then sort of starts shattering.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
This is not an error detective. This is just a preference. Okay. I've been looking at the John Royal retailer incentive cover for this issue, and I realized if I could make a very small change, if you look at Stormovic's fist holding his cigar, there's a very thick line down from his thumb on the side of his hand, and I wish that Dana had a thicker black line on top of her hat and her shoulder, so she would push forward more from whoever it is who was behind her, since I get their names mixed up. Anyway, my actual error detected is, and this one I totally forgive. on page 1, in the second panel, Horror Show is holding Dana. Must be driving our listeners to distraction. Horror Show is holding Dana, and there are 6 other people crowded around him because the van is not that big. And then in the next panel, they're all gone. And he's holding her up in his arms, but he's still in front of the same 2 back doors to the van. And so this is a small continuity issue where the van isn't that big. Those other characters wouldn't have like stood up and backed out of view. He wouldn't have stood up and sort of shimmied back right up against the inside back of the van so that we don't see anyone else. And I think what's happening here is Andrew Lee Griffith is drawing Horror Show sort of emotionally by himself in this panel, even if physically he would not be by himself in the back of this van a moment later.
Good, no prize. So yeah, maybe a sequence there where potentially not drawing the background at all and just having a single bold color might be.
Oh yeah.
My error detected is towards the end of the book, at the very last page, in fact. So Colonel Breakoff says he's in the forklift with Dana. He says, "I can function. It is only my arm that was affected. Get us out of here, Dana." And in that panel, he is holding on to the side of the forklift with one arm and shooting his gun with the other. So it looks like his arm wasn't too badly affected after all. Too much. Is that getting super nitpicky, or is that an error?
No, I thought of that when I read it, but I didn't write it down.
Stop. Hammer time. Time to beat the soles of your boots with my face. Sucking chest wounds, red ninjas, brain scanners, rubber oozes, blue ninjas, and then some more sucking chest wounds. Hammer time.
I didn't have a hammer time. We could probably find one if we tried hard enough.
The is it the Corvette? That's this Russian ship? In a general sense, that seemed like, something you would not see in any other comic book published this year or next year. That the writer is identifying a real-world prototype, a prototypical vehicle that belongs to an enemy army or an enemy, technology, and it felt very G.I. Joe. It felt very Hama to me. Like, I don't know what that is. That's very cool. That looks like a specific thing, and it's been named. So Hama must have seen it in the New York Times a year ago, or got some magazine that refers to it. And when it came time to write this scene, he thought, well, how would they get out of there? Well, there's this Russian thing. There's this fancy boat that a helicopter can land on. Like, yep. And then I thought, oh, poor Andrew Lee Griffith has to draw this thing. It's like he drew this complicated helicopter for 2 panels. He draws this, complicated boat for 1 panel. It's like someone give him a couple panels of dialogue where the lights go out.
How are we going to How are we going to operate on the Oktober Guard in the dark? Perfect.
At the bottom of page 1, when you said, had there been no background, that would feel and look emotional, and we'd be less aware that the other 6 characters are not in the shot, and maybe they should be. 2 panels later, the second panel of page 2, there is a sort of rare, and then the final panel of page 2, there is a rare panel in this whole comic where Andrew Lee Griffith has decided to not draw any background. And in both cases, there's so little space, it doesn't even read as a time saver. It just reads as sort of, I don't want to overcrowd the art, or you wouldn't see the background anyway because of the word balloons. But to sort of loop back around to, I think this is a job well done in less time than normal. If there were any shortcuts, I guess it's these 2 panels. But, you'd probably do that anyway.
Yeah.
There used to be a pudding that was over-egged. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. At first it was British, but then it was Commonwealth. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. But now there's a new player in town, a comic book writer of some renown. He's using real world examples and peppering the issues with lots of samples. It's a Larry Hama colloquialism. He's talking G.I. Joe and all its heroism. Can you guess what it is? Is it something new? Now listeners, Larry drops a slice of real life on you.
I had a colloquialism. This was an exclamation from Horror Show. He says, Kyort. Chyort, which is a Russian cuss word meaning damn or equivalent.
I have one more. It's not quite a Hamism. It's an adjacent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on page 7. 1 week later at the, I don't know if you say the word Baku or if you say the letters. 1 week later at the BACU Robotics and Cybernetics Center in St. Petersburg, Russia. That's a real thing.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I didn't even think to look that up.
The Institute of Robotics and Technical Cybernetics in St. Petersburg, Russia, built between 1973 and 1986. So that interesting building on the left that looks like a I don't know, like a turbine or an egg beater. That's a real thing, and the photo that I have found on the internet. But it would be very easy in any comic or any other G.I. Joe comic to just make up some place where the Oktober Guard are operated on and saved. And the readers either wouldn't know the difference, or most of them may not care. Most of us may not care. But, Hama is going to ground this comic in the real world because it's fun and he learns something, because he has to go research it from a book or a magazine or the internet, or maybe he gets to show off. It's like, I've always known about the BACU. I can put it in this issue of G.I. Joe. And that'll make sense and that'll look smart. And I think even if the reader doesn't recognize that it's real, it doesn't stand out as real or particularly not real. I think on a subtle level, a reader might be a little more satisfied because, the architecture, like, okay, that looks like that was built in the 60s or 70s. Mm-hmm. And that does look like what little I know of, Eastern European and Soviet era architecture.
Yeah.
As opposed to, if it was just some warehouse anywhere on an island in the Pacific or somewhere in Russia. And, it'd be easier for Andrew Lee Griffith to either Google a warehouse or just draw a big rectangular warehouse thing and make it up. But, no, this authenticity adds something to it. And those of us who are paying attention to these very specific weapons, it's like, they got so-and-so's AK-47 wrong, or so-and-so's holding an AK-47. He's supposed to be holding a so-and-so. Here's one panel. And I nodded in approval when I read this panel. I thought, I don't know what this is, but this is cool.
Excellent. I found the photo that panel is based on as you were talking.
Oh, we should I Spy Crystal Ball shows up for a panel.
Yeah. Okay. There he is.
All right,
there's that Crystal Ball.
Good.
Yeah, we should have mentioned him, shouldn't we? Yeah.
I like that. I like that you can see his accessory. That is important to me. I would not like this panel if his hypnotism shield were not slightly in view in the passenger seat, because he's not in costume, and I need something to visually point to. This is that guy you like from that toy you like.
Yeah.
And, in the story moment, he shouldn't be wearing his costume.
Yeah, he's still in mufti from when he was delivering pizzas. Yeah. And yeah, sort of following up the story beat that for whatever reason he decided to betray Cobra, would you call it? I don't know, or align himself with the he was sort of doing a sub mission for one of the factions, wasn't he? He was sort of spying on Cobra. their behalf. And yeah, he sort of aligned himself with the Oktober Guard. So he sort of, again, he sort of come out of Springfield on their heels in the Oktober Guard's own van to rescue them.
You know, maybe I did have a favorite line. That page that I just referred to with the real buildings, the real place in St. Petersburg, Russia. In the third panel, we see Dana in the back to tank for a second time, and the two scientists are turned away from Brekhov, and he's saying, "Now I get it." Hold on. "Now I get it. You two were on that stealth corvette in anticipation of new meat for your experimental project." And the male scientist says, "Well, the fresher the better." Damn.
Very good.
Yo, cola, not grape soda.
Yo, Cola, it's the time to give comics the rank. They blew off fine. 0 to 10, that's the score. Had enough or hungry for more? The Joes can open their fizzy pop, but you know us, we can't stop. It's Joage time.
Shall I go first? You go first?
I'll go first. 7. It's a little hard to rank this issue because there's actually so much going on, and yet we started by saying this went by really fast, which is a way of saying not a lot seems to be going on. I still don't entirely agree with the central thesis of the issue. You know, why do you need the Oktober Guard to have come back? But the note that I wrote is, if you're going to, this, I like how this is done, and I like how it's going to tie in.
I think I chime pretty close to that. Yeah, I'm probably down with a 7-2. It's not necessarily my favorite of the most recent issues. It's, I guess, a story that kind of needed to be told, given the introduction of the Oktober Guard and the mystery that kind of set up. That we definitely wanted to see that resolved in some form, and just, you know, tie that little thread of plots into a bow. Some sort of quibbles with the execution. That sort of helicopter scene was a little bit weird and confusing. Horishow's sort of force of will not feeling quite deserved. More sort of disposable blue ninjas. Sort of feels a little bit repetitive and sort of undermining some of the menace of the Blue Ninja Force that was established earlier on in the run. Those are probably the kind of things that, you know, detract from it. But as you say, it was a very fast read, but they managed to somehow pack in a huge amount into the story. And flicking,
I know we.
And flicking to that last page in the trailer for the next issue. Yeah, enormously looking forward to the A plot of the Cobra Island casinos, seeing how that will progress. Yeah, definitely looking forward to next issue in a big way.
So I know we've sort of wrapped up because we've done ARAH Detected and I Spy and Hamazons and Yo Joage. Page 17, I wanted to mention on page 17, once again, Neil Uetake does some really nice lettering.
Let's talk about SFX, baby. Let's talk about pew and scree. Let's talk about shooting gun things and the sound effects. We'll see. Let's talk about SFX. Let's talk about SFX.
FSSSSHHH for the flamethrower in 2 panels. That's an evocative flame shaped lettering font, and the letters get bigger and smaller, and they don't go into straight line. They sort of zip up and down like a roller coaster. And then in the final panel of that page, underneath Horishow's rocket or missile having launched, I guess it's both a rocket and a missile. Foosh! That sound effect, that lettering, tracks underneath the cloud, the trail, in a really satisfying and pleasing way. But I wanted to ask you about this. When Quantum Eradicator is introduced 3 pages earlier, he's got 2 arms, and then on page 16, he has 2 arms. And then when he's glowing red hot on page 17, he has 4 arms. Mm-hmm. And I know that the Blue Ninjas, the main one is sort of changed form and evolved. Am I missing something? Is there any indication here that this Blue Ninja, who's the bad guy in Star Wars episode?
Yeah, General Grievous.
2? Yeah, when General Grievous holds out his 2 arms and then 2 more arms sort of come out of them, and then he's got way too many lightsabers. Is there something that I'm forgetting from a previous issue where the Blue Ninjas can either split their arms or sort of have more?
I'm not sure it's something that's been explicitly explained, but I kind of went with it that okay, he's covered up by this sort of blue camo, the fire has burned that away, and he's sort of going into a new combat mode where he's able to split his arms into 2 so that he goes from 2 arms to 4 arms. It feels like that's intentional.
Okay. I guess Andrew Lee Griffith does draw these 4 arms as skinnier than the 2 arms on the previous page. Yeah. So in terms of volume, it adds up. Anyway, I gave this comic a 7. Sounds like you gave it a 7.
There we go.
To pick up on your thread, I love the cover for the next issue, and I'll talk about it in a future episode. But I do look forward to the next issue, and I'm happy to welcome back Shannon Gallant to the book.
To the book, indeed. Cool. So
wait, Gallant. Did I say it wrong? Ugh.
What did you say? Gallant.
We've only interviewed him on the show. I should keep a little index card next to me with last names and Oktober Guard member names spelled phonetically.
Very good. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to share with you and with the listeners that on the website I've introduced a new feature, so that if you want to get in touch with the show, that you can click on the link just in the Contact Us section, and you can leave us a voice note. So up to 60 seconds of you talking to us. You can let us know your opinion of the most recent shows. If there was something that we got wrong or missed, or you'd like to add in your comment, or indeed if you'd like to submit your very own trailer for G.I. Joe Origins for me to create, to add some music and stuff to put into and feature on the show. And as a trailer for that, S-Jubs trialed it out to see how it would work, and he left us a little voice note, so I'll play it here.
So, it occurred to me that Talking Joe uses a video game music as its intro. Did you know that Talking Joe, when first aired, used a video game music as its intro? I know it sounds like the DIC cartoon, but actually, the music is sourced from the Konami video game cabinet from 1992. Got to get tough, Yo Joe.
Was that news to you, Tim, that the Konami arcade game used the same music as the Deep cartoon? Got to get tough, Yo Joe.
I don't think I had that fact at hand, but I have played... Is this the coin-op one or the Nintendo one? I have played the coin-op one and won it, so I have known that fact. I have to say, I'm so grateful for S-Jubs to return to the show and test out your cool technology. I was really hoping for a question or praise.
Okay, I'll cut it out then. Do better. Only questions for praise accepted.
No, only questions or praise or criticism.
Okay, of a criticism of S-Jubs. So that is available to all of you, the listeners. Head on over to talkingjoe.co.uk on the website, right near the bottom, is a button in the Contact Us section where you can leave us a voice note. Look forward to some people using that and trying it out. On the page, there's also links to all of the YouTube episodes, which are basically the same as the audio-only episodes, but with added visual content. Links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all of that good jazz, including our Patreon page. So a big thanks to our backers, Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, and Justin, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. Tim, where can people find you?
My brick and mortar comic book store is Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts, the United States. And my blog is arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent stuff. And I spoke to Heather earlier on, and she can be found again at the website HVON illustration.com. So I think that is almost us done. So next time on Talking Joe, we will be continuing to cover the ARAH run with issue 291, High Stakes Part 1, with the return of SL Gallant or Gallant or Gallant or Glantz, or any number of ways which we could choose to mess it up, which at the moment has a solicitation release date of April the 6th, which at the time of recording is next week.
And certainly is not happening.
But
hold on, let me look at the internal retailer site.
But
oh yeah, you're right. Yeah,
But this issue 290, that had a very late pushback of 1 week as well. They even went as far as releasing all of the previews, advertising it as coming out that week before the date was pushed back 1 week. So I wonder, maybe we'll see just a short delay for this one, perhaps. With that bombshell on the release date done, I think we are through. But remember,
nobody beats Talking Joe, a real American podcast!
Oh, we're American now. We were international last time.
An international podcast!
With people from England and America, and listening all over the world. Laters.